Ethiopia's military says that it's planning to enter the Tigray regional capital of Mekele and eliminate rebellious forces amid diplomatic efforts to end the conflict in the country's north. This week, two top U.S. diplomats flew into Addis Ababa to push for a ceasefire and the release of political prisoners.
Ethiopia has been gripped by war for more than a year, with the federal military and its allies battling forces loyal to the Tigray People's Liberation Front, TPLF, the political party that controls Tigray. In an interview with state-affiliated media outlet, Ethiopia's Defense Army chief says the country would not beat peace until the TPLF was eliminated.
This enemy is still not eliminated. It is there. It is still gathering a majority army in its hundreds of thousands. It definitely needs to be eliminated. Ethiopia will not enjoy peace unless they are gotten rid of. Not only that, but those who are backing these forces will also not refrain unless we eliminate them. Mekele and Tigray are Ethiopian territory. No one will stop us. We will go in and eliminate the enemy. There should not be any confusion about this. The Ethiopian people should not perceive this war as over. It is not yet over.
The TPLF says Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed wants to end the country's ethnically based federal government system, but Abiy says the TPLF is hungry to seize the national power it once held. For months, there's been an uneasy stalemate between the two sides, punctuated by sporadic fighting. The TPLF force control most of Tigray, but are surrounded by hostile forces from neighboring regions of Afar and Amhara, which are allied with the federal military. The conflict, which broke out in November 2020, has displaced millions and triggered widespread hunger.
Well, for some analysis, we're now joined by Horn of Africa policy and security analyst Abdullahi Boru Halake. Abdullahi, thanks very much indeed for joining us. Ethiopia, very much in the news. Yesterday we were talking about Twitter, but today it looks like things have escalated quite a bit when we hear the language of the deputy chief of the army.
Yes, indeed. And, when war or conflict is cast in existential terms, and that is just what the military leader did there, in their head, at least the only way that this war is brought to an end is by completely eliminating the TPLF. But you've got to understand that at this point, 14 months into this conflict, the only way you can do that is by completely, not the TPLF now, the entire community. That is how it's perceived by the community. And that language doesn't bode well for, a political settlement that, we had the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres. You've had the American diplomatic leadership being in the region to try and secure that. But it seems like the distance between, political settlement and war or conflict is far, far wider than we would probably want at this stage.
I want to believe that General Tadesse spoke out of turn. I can't believe that this is Addis Ababa's position, because on the one hand they're saying that Tigray is a part of Ethiopia, and then to use words like eliminate the enemy, I mean, that is killing your own people.
And that is when I have a lot of problems when, particularly people who support this administration in Addis Ababa, cast themselves in Pan-African, language. Is it Pan-African to kill your own people and say that you want to get rid of a community or even a group of community? Is it Pan-African to have, a military from a neighboring country to be in your country, to be engaged in, killing your own people? I think one would want to, against all the hope that he spoke out in, that view, or that doesn't represent the mainstream position of the Ethiopian government. But unfortunately, over the last few months, we've seen that that is not necessarily true. The Prime Minister is on record, for using some visceral terms, calling the community, cockroaches, cancer, and people close to him. So I think we would want to believe that is not the official position of the government, but I think it is. You'd be hard pressed to think otherwise, and that is just one side, right? What would you expect to any Tigrayan or anybody in TPLF or TDF? How would they perceive that? Insisting that Tigray is part of Ethiopia, it's good and fine. I don't think even the TDF, much as sometimes they use the same rhetoric of trying to say we want to break away from Ethiopia, I don't think they would want to be nestled between Eritrea on one side, with which they have problems, and Ethiopia, if the breakup comes up, because the constitutional threshold, the Article 39, when you invoke that, the threshold is fairly high. I don't think they will be able to get that short of, having a military victory or battlefield. So I don't think they would want to be sandwiched between these two countries, but they would use that as a rhetoric, as a beginning position. But it just tells me again, Peter, we've spoken about this. Whenever I come on your show, I always insist that there is a window, because I want to believe that this conflict can and should be resolved. But every day, we get, a more intense, polarizing language from the government, but also from the opposition side.
When we look back in history, when we hear words from authorities like, we are going to eliminate these people, the enemy, this is usually associated with a genocide, or am I overreading the situation?
You are not overreading, and for me, generally, I say I would rather overreact in trying to protect women and children and people, rather than we all say no, it's not as bad as we think it is, and then we find ourselves in situations that I do not want us to think about, right? This continent has experienced its fair share of, the consequences of such rhetoric. I don't need to remind you. We've seen it, in Kenya in 2007, 2008. We've seen it in Rwanda. We've seen it across this continent. So, if history is any guide, and we should all, even if we don't like it, even if we don't want to indulge in it, the forces of history are far more stronger than we would want to be sometimes acknowledge. But we need to be cognizant. Why not overreact when we have Amnesty reports, human rights reports, UN reports, showing egregious human rights violations taking place when that region is blockaded and it doesn't receive humanitarian aid, and aid, therefore, food, therefore, is being used as an act of war as the UN Security Council's resolution. When rape, women and children are being raped, and rape being used as, as an instrument of war against UN Security Council's resolution against all the international humanitarian and human rights law. Why shouldn't we? We could wait and say, oh no, we don't have enough information. And we might find ourselves a few months later that, something far worse has happened.
This conflict is well over a year old now, and one of the things that I've observed, it seems as if Addis Ababa has been making a series of miscalculations. When this conflict started, they thought they'd go into Mekele, and a couple of weeks later, there'd be no more problems. It's a year and a bit now, and I just wonder if this latest stance is another miscalculation, because to think that the hearts and minds of people will just fall by the side surely is not really understanding what's happening in the north.
I think you are absolutely right, Peter. I think this administration initially overestimated its capacity and underestimated the resolve of the Tigrayan people and the TDF, which is their representatives. When he announced that in November that this will be a very short law and order operation. The Prime Minister, I think, even in his wildest dreams, if they sat down in a war room, drawing up scenarios, I did not think they had any idea that 14 months down the road, we will find ourselves here. There were moments in the, in the dynamics of this conflict where Addis was almost falling. And some will look back and say, no, that is an exaggeration. It wasn't an exaggeration. If, the UAE and Iran and others did not come with, to the aid of this administration, the drones that this administration have used against the TDF has, pushed them back, without which this administration could have likely fallen. That was a moment, all right, that, look, we might not win this war decisively on the battlefield. How about we reach a settlement? Political settlement, by their very nature, are never perfect because you do not get everything that you want. But simultaneously, if you dig in, more damage will be caused, and you're not guaranteed that you're going to win. If your military, combined with military from other areas, from other countries, including Eritrea, has not completely subdued this, I mean, the history of counterinsurgency is littered with military might being defeated by, a smaller group. Afghanistan is a good example. 20 years of the United States staying there, trillions of dollar blood and treasure that was spent, and they did not subdue that group. So I think the forces of history could teach us a great deal, and for sanity to prevail, for this conflict to be stopped, and for a political settlement to be reached, at least for people to stop suffering.
All right, we're going to have lots more conversations, but perhaps one final question. I'm just wondering, it seems as if Addis Ababa has decided, this is a zero-sum game now, winner takes all, and I'm just wondering if this is a miscalculation, could this be the end of the Ethiopian federal project?
It might not, but it is a huge dent to it, right? This project, I'm glad you used that. This project is just 30 years old. The project of ethnic federalism. It is not by any means a perfect project. It has got a lot of flaws. But what this project does is it acts as a pressure valve, because a huge country with over 100 ethnic groups and the power for centuries has been concentrated in one region. And so TPLF knew when they came into power as part of that four-part coalition, they knew that having, this dispersed power and resources at the local level, including using of, the indigenous language, will serve as a valve. People can do a lot of their stuff at the local level, and they will be able to do with their school, their culture, their everything. And that will, help in bringing the political temperature down. It's not perfect. But the problem is, for Abiy and his people, they would want, under the guise of unity, to centralize. But you cannot kill your way to centralization of that. The history of centralization, it has provided us with a lot of problems that we know that we do not need to rehash on this program. But decentralization, problematic as it is, it has been useful to an extent, but centralization is actually throwing the baby with the bathwater. But this conflict is a real dent to that project.
Abdullahi, always a pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much indeed. Your insights, greatly appreciated. Thanks.
My pleasure.